right, can I get your name, state your name, date of birth, where you're from, and your rank in the military?
Yes, Jamie Ryan Wilson. My birthday is May 22nd, 1980. I'm originally from Summersville, West Virginia, and I was a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps.
All right, what year did you go into the Marine Corps?
I entered the Marine Corps in March of 2000.
Right out of high school?
No. I went to college for about a year and a half at Fairmont State, and decided to join the Marine Corps because the funds for my college got a little low. So I initially entered for the GI Bill, was signed up to be a reservist at the initial go, and then once I got to the MEP station to leave for recruit training at Parris Island, I signed up active duty.
Okay, all right. What did you go into college for? What was your original major?
Well, my original major was just criminal justice. Was my original major.
All right. When you went into the Marine Corps, tell me about your first couple of days, like basic training, going in, how you felt, what happened.
Well, everything was fine. It was a little tough. I went to the military entrance processing station, which is MEPS, down at Beckley. Went down there and left. It was a rainy day. I had about an 8-9 hour drive in a van to Parris Island. It was pretty enjoyable there, but then once you got to the gate, then you realized where you were. Once you saw it, and then when you first get there, of course, at Parris Island, they have yellow footprints in the Marine Corps for you to stand on, and that's when it starts. They come running out the doors and start yelling and screaming and hollering. It lets you realize where you are. The first couple days, it's kind of the first day you do not sleep. Once you get there, you don't go to sleep until the following day because you get there in the middle of the night. Because they don't want you to get your bearings when you're coming in during the day. They want you to go in at night. So you don't sleep that first night. It's just kind of the whole first week is just kind of getting everything in order, getting your paperwork and your shots and all your gear and all that kind of stuff. And then Saturday you do a initial strength test, and then once you're done with that, you move into your training. And once training starts, it's normally like a job. It just, days go by fast. But that first week it carried on like an eternity because you didn't really, did the whole thing of hurry up and wait. You take off and get somewhere, and they'd move you in a hurry, and then you'd sit there for an hour or so. But once training starts, it was like a normal everyday thing. It was quick, and it seems as soon as you got up, it's time to go to bed.
Right. Okay. What did you focus on when you were? What was your job or whatever in them?
My initial job in the Marine Corps was artillery. I went to school at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Once the way the Marine Corps works, once you graduate recruit training, you get to come home for 10 days. Then you go through what's called Marine Combat Training. That's down at Camp Geiger, North Carolina. Once you finish that, that's just the initial thing to show you combat skills, how to dig a fighting hole and how to engage in combat type activity, because they don't teach you that at recruit training. You learn that separate. Once that's done, that's about 2 weeks. Once you're done with that, I got on a plane and went to Oklahoma, and it was about an 8-week course that I was there, because I was there a little longer because there wasn't a class starting, so we'd have to clean the squad base and I'll just hang out. Once we got done with that, it was all right. It's pretty exciting to see Oklahoma and see it flat and be able to see your rounds once you shot, see them impact. It was pretty interesting. It was neat.
So living in West Virginia was a lot different when you went to Oklahoma.
Oh yeah, a lot different. A lot different. It was really cold. I was surprised being out in the Midwest. I thought it'd be a little warmer, but well, I guess without the mountains and stuff. I was there towards the end of fall. It was around October when I was there, and left in November, and it was pretty cold.
And that was all in the year 2000, right?
All in the year 2000, yes.
All right. Where were you at when 9/11 happened? And
I was actually, September 11th happened. I was preparing for a deployment with the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, and we were at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Normally the Marine Expeditionary Units go to a place called AP Hill in Virginia to do your initial training, because when you go on a Marine Expeditionary Unit, which is the units that are out on the Navy ships at all times in the Mediterranean, you've got to go through and get things on a checklist. You got to meet certain criteria and pass so your unit's ready and capable, combat capable. So we were at Fort Bragg, and it was about 2 days before we were supposed to come back. We were staged and cleaning everything up and getting ready to come back to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, where I was stationed. And September 11th happened. All I can really remember was they went around, and here it is on a military base, and They handed everybody ammunition. We had to lock and load our M16s because they were afraid that Fort Bragg's such a large place. They, once that came and everybody was so fearful, they were afraid that they were going to attack military bases. So Fort Bragg was one of the ones that the DOD said we had to get ready for. They actually took some of our howitzers, which is the artillery pieces, and set up on the road to be ready, and they gave us ammunition for that. So it was a little scary. And then they'd go around and they were pulling everybody from New York and Washington, D.C. away to contact their family to ensure that they were alive and all that. So I was actually preparing to deploy anyway it would have been just in the Mediterranean, but that changed the whole face of it. So.
Definitely. Did you know any friends or family that was involved in New York or Washington, D.C.?
The only people I have, my wife that I have now, I was dating at that point, and her cousin was a firefighter in New Jersey, and they actually went to help out at the World Trade Center. So that was the only connection I had there. So.
Right. Okay. So when your deployment was changed to go, you went to Iraq, right?
No, we went to, that was in 2002 was
Okay.
when this happened. When we deployed, obviously September 11th was 2001, we still deployed on time. You had the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit that was the first people to be in Afghanistan.
Oh, okay.
So they sent us over, and at that initial point we thought we were going to relieve them in Afghanistan, but they sent the Army in.
Okay.
And we actually went to the Horn of Africa in a place called Djibouti, Africa, and we were the first military there, and we set the base up for the Horn of Africa. That way there'd be a central place for all the combat units and stuff to come. So we were actually the first people there in Africa, and we started the base being built up, which is still there today.
Okay. What did you do after you got in, you were in Africa, you got your stuff set up? What do you do next?
Well, we just basically at that point we're just on call on the boats the same way the Marine Expeditionary Units always are, the Muse. The only thing we typically when you're on those, you get to hit a lot of ports and see a lot of different countries. That was taken away. We were actually on ship for 107 straight days, so it's close to the whole time being on the ship, which got a little bad because it felt like a floating prison sometimes. We got so bored, we would see who could go the longest without going outside in the sunlight, just to go. And I had a friend go 45 days without seeing actual, just to do things to pass the time. And then at one point they actually, in 2002, when India and Pakistan were arguing and they were talking about nuclear, attacking each other, we pulled all the way over to the coast of India and was going to go in for a NEO, which is a evacuation of all the U.S. citizens.
Right.
We were going to go in there, and they gave us all the situations and brought us in for the report, and we loaded up all of our gear and had it ready to go on the helicopters, and then they diplomatically ended it. We didn't have to go in, so that was about the only excitement for that. But it was fun seeing all the different countries. I was able to go to France. I was able to see some Spain, South Africa. I went to South Africa and Bahrain, so it was pretty interesting.
Right, definitely. So did you did you ever make it to Iraq?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
We came back in August of 2002. Trying to get my dates here right.
Right.
August of 2002, we came back. I was actually sent back early from Rota, Spain. It's where they clean everything up before we come back over to the States. And I was sent back early as an advance party because my first son was being born. So I came back and was back a day and a half, and he was born. So that started in August of 2002. And we went into our normal thing. Everybody went on their leave because you get 30 days of leave when you come back from deployment. So we went and had our leave, and then came back, and just normal thing of artillery. We'd go do training at Camp Lejeune or Fort Bragg or wherever we could. And then, of course, the talk started of Iraq coming up. And that started around November because that's when the 1st Marine Division out of California moved over and started Camp Commando in Kuwait. We had been told to be ready, they're probably going to send 2nd Marine Division. And it actually happened on New Year's Eve, December 31st of 2002. We got the phone call. They started going out saying, we're leaving in 2 weeks to go to Kuwait. So it was kind of tough. I just just had been married recently, had my first son, had been home for 2.5 months, and now I'm going back. So we had 2 weeks was our marching orders to get everything packed up and ready, and we were right back on a Navy ship to USS Ashland. And we went over there, took the time to get over to the Persian Gulf, and then we set up in a place called Camp Shoup, Kuwait. We were there from February, because we left the States in around the 10th or 12th of January 2003, and then around the 1st of February we got to Camp Shoup, Kuwait. And we just kind of were told, hey, we're going to sit here and wait, see what the president, what the orders he gives, and see where we're going. We would occasionally go out and practice and train in Kuwait and do certain things of that nature just to get ready. And then, of course, on March trying to remember the exact dates here, I believe it was March the 17th, we were sitting there at Camp Shoup, and people had radios, and we were actually listening to President Bush give the ultimatum to Saddam Hussein. And the next day we headed up to the Kuwaiti and Iraq line and waited for a day, and then we crossed over.
Were you excited to go into combat with Iraq, or nervous, or
Yeah, well, I'd say it's a little bit of both. You're excited at first when you get over, and then you start. Even when we crossed over, I believe it was around March the 19th when we actually crossed over. And you're excited because it's just, when we crossed over, it was like you could tell when you're crossing over, because they had the wire and stuff for Kuwait, and when you're crossing over and then you actually went into the Iraq border, it was exciting because here you are and you've been training for years to do this. So you're all excited when you're initially going, but the nervousness kicks in the first time you hear a bullet go by you. Definitely. That's when you get nervous. And that didn't happen till we actually pulled in. It was around March the 22nd. We pulled right outside of Van Nazariya, Iraq. For the first couple of days, we didn't do anything. It seemed like we were just rolling across the country and nothing was happening. All you'd see was farmers and stuff out with their camels and herding their sheep, and it just seemed like nothing was going to happen. It's just kind of getting boring, because here we are and we're expecting all this excitement and there's nothing going on. Then we get to outside of Van Nazariya, Iraq on the 22nd. We had our first fire mission, and it was to destroy a Iraq battalion that was set up for their artillery that was on the outskirts of Nazariya. So we did that and went to bed, and the next day we were supposed to move into Nazariya, Iraq, which was March the 23rd, and we pulled in right outside of Nazariya, Iraq, and we're staged, and we were staged off to the road, and to kind of explain it, Route 8 in Iraq went around. That's the main highway in Iraq that takes you from the border to Baghdad and Iran and everywhere. And the Route 8 actually kind of like a bypass that we have in the city. I talk with my hands bad sometimes. But to kind of bypass the city of Van Nazariya, and the Army was initially supposed to go in and secure Nazariya, and we were just going to come in and occupy it. But for some reason the Army got a little discombobulated. They took Route 8 and went around, and they were under the impression that there was nothing in Nazariya, because they had went on the bypass instead of going through the city, which happens a lot in combat with the fall of war and everything. It's nothing that they did wrong. They just went the wrong way. And so we had pulled in. Nobody was really excited, didn't think nothing was going to happen. We pulled off and staged out in Nazariya, and Colonel Bailey, that was in charge of our regimental combat team, RCT-2, he was on the radio telling all the commanders of each single unit where they were going to go and set up. About that time, several Humvees and 5-ton trucks went zipping by us, and he got on and asked all the commanders, hey, was that you, was that you? And nobody said no. And about 2 minutes later, they started exploding. And come to find out, that was Jessica Lynch's convoy.
Oh.
Yeah, she went by us in Nazariya, and that was them that went zipping by, because they got lost. They were separated. The tanks that kind of tore up Jessica Lynch and her unit was actually designed for our Marine tanks.
Oh.
To knock them out. So they got Jessica Lynch, and once that started, they had us, we knew it was on. So we just started speeding out of there, and we went and hurry up and kind of hastily set up our howitzers and just started rocking and rolling ever since then. When we first pulled in there, we shot a mission, and then it was kind of like the night before. It just kind of died down for a minute. And then 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines went into the city after the tanks initially went in, and they kind of got their bearings, lost one unit. I believe it was Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, and they went up a place that was later referred to as Ambush Alley, that you'll see when you read anything about Nasiriyah. And 1-2 accidentally went up a wrong alley, and they just got ambushed. And they actually had one of our forward observers with our unit was killed, and they actually had an Amtrak, which is clear full of, a squad or two of Marines completely killed. Wiped them out in one setting, and then it was just, we were staged off, and I remember we were there, and everybody was drinking their waters and hanging out, and then bullets started flying by us, and then the nervousness kicked in. Everybody was scared and jumping down, and just continuously shot missions. And then the night of, I believe it was March the 25th, a horrible sandstorm came, and that was probably the most scared I've ever been in my life, because you couldn't see. You couldn't see in front of you, and all you could hear was the Iraqi units around you, but you couldn't see. Obviously, they're trained and adapted to that type of environment. We're not. You couldn't see probably from me to you in front of you. And one of the units that we were with, Bravo Battery. I was with 1st Battalion, 10th Marines. I was in Charlie Battery. And Bravo Battery started to get attacked, so we had to shoot missions to kind of help them out. But I remember as scared as I was, because you don't think in a type of warfare that we have today that you're going to have to fight up close. And when our battery gunny came around and handed us all grenades, you knew that something was going to happen. Thank God we didn't have to use them, but still that let it soak in that this is it.
It's a real war now.
Yeah, it is. And so that was initially with that, and then after, the next day after that is the sandstorm came in, and it was a downpour of rain. I mean, it was bad. We all had to get up underneath this. We moved to 7 tons at that point. You had to get underneath the 7-ton trucks and hide, because it was just a downpour. There was probably, and when it rains, it looks like a lake. It's not like here, where it soaks, it looks like a lake. You can't see the ground, just water everywhere. And so we were hiding up underneath there, and then the next day, it was actually pretty interesting, because every time we would shoot, you'd get a report back, an after-action report of what it was you took out. And they shot down a mission force the next day. The sun had come out and dried everything up. And it was a Battalion 10, which there's a total of 6 guns in each battery, and there's 3 batteries that actually fire. And so that was 18 guns. And so every gun shot 10 rounds of a round called DPICM, which has about 80 grenades in each round. And we shot 10 of those. And the reason why we shot it, we got the report, is because there was 2,000 reserves coming in from the Iraqi National Guard into the train station, and we ended up taking them all out after that. So that was pretty exciting. But then after that, we just, Nasiriyah was secured. The Army had come in behind us, and we just moved north. We never made it to Baghdad. 1st Marine Division did, out of California. We just we moved up to Al-Qut and places like that. I believe it was Al-Qut, I'm not for sure now. But we had moved to the border of Iran, and if you read in history or anything of past cultures, of Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylon Empire, and we were actually up where his hanging gardens were. And it was really, really neat, because all over Iraq was nothing but desert, but up here it was lush green, tall grass. It was beautiful. There were trees. And so
Nice.
after that initial thing in Nasiriyah, it was just kind of a downhill thing. Then we moved up north, and after the 1st Marine Division occupied Baghdad, we moved back out and went and secured the bridges back in Nasiriyah, and just kind of stood a security checkpoint, and would go out, and people coming into the city, we'd have to check. That's the first time I ever seen somebody, they broke down an AK-47, one of the Iraqis, and had it taped on his inside of his thigh. So they'd try to sneak things in. Not that if he was trying to hurt us, it was more of, because now their government was gone, it was more of their own personal security.
Right.
But then after that, we moved back into to Kuwait. I was there for about 5 to 6 months, and then we boarded the USS Ashland again and came home. So I was home in June. I was back around the end of June of 2003.
And then you were done, or?
Yeah, I was done with Iraq. At that point, I was reaching towards my end of active duty service. I had a wife and a son, and then I re-enlisted. They had an option for an 0811, which was my job, a cannoneer and artillery, to go to Parris Island to be a weapons instructor. So I went down there, and I was there for 3 years at Parris Island as a weapon instructor. Did various jobs down there, from working on the rifle range to being a company gunny, being in charge of about 150 people, and then a Randy Ismet, which is just a simulator with the weapons I'm sure you've seen, where you get a shoot like you have here at the college.
Right.
Ran that, and then I got my orders to be a recruiter, and I did that for 2 years, and got out of the Marine Corps and started preaching. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So, I mean, your dad's a preacher too,
Yes.
right? So have you always wanted to be a preacher?
Well, I was actually around 17. I felt called to the ministry. Got a little scared about it. Went about as my wayward ways, and started doing things I wanted to do. Got back into church while I was a recruiter in Brunswick, Georgia, is where I recruited. My wife finally convinced me after several years of persuasive powers to go back to church. So I got back into church and just felt as if God was still telling me, this is what you're supposed to do. So as I was a recruiter, I started working with the church, told the pastor down there. He kind of informed me that, hey, a call to ministry is not like God calling out to you, and like he did Moses. It's kind of, if you have a desire in your heart to do something, God's the one that's placed that desire in your heart. So he started helping me and mentoring me and taking me around to the hospital visits and the funerals, and he actually brought me on as his assistant pastor. I wasn't getting paid or anything, but because I was still in the Marine Corps. And then I finished up, because I extended to January 2009. I didn't re-enlist a second time, just kind of extended my contract. Then I got out of the Marine Corps to pursue the ministry full time. The job didn't really work out in Brunswick because the economy when the economy went bad, it hit down there really hard because it's a lot of factories. And it hit Georgia really tough at first before it did here. My dad was working, he works kind of both sides, and he was working, he has 2 jobs. Was working with the coal mines, so he initially brought me up here, and I was working in the coal mines, installing things for ventilation. And then the church had opened up the opportunity for me to come in and be the youth pastor, and I took it and been here ever since.
Do you feel that your time in the military makes you a better minister?
Yeah, I do. The one thing, it's kind of twofold. Moving up and being a staff sergeant, which is an E6, and the experience I had at Parris Island I was just a sergeant, but I was doing an E7's job, a gunnery sergeant's job, and I had so many people under me, and I was used to, in the Marine Corps, when somebody tells you to do something, you're instilled with discipline to do it.
Right.
And that's the hard part of being in the ministry, is I'm used to telling people when you do something, you do it.
Right.
It's not so hard with the teenagers as it is the adults. And I'm used to that mentality of, if I tell you to do something, just do it, don't ask me any questions. And obviously in the real world, you can't do that because, one, the people that work with me at the church are volunteers. So they could just up and quit. They're not getting paid. And I got to value what they're doing because they're just trying to do the same job I'm doing.
Right.
They're just trying to help people out. And so that's been tough for me. The one thing that has helped me is the discipline. I really was failing miserably at college, and that's why I joined the Marine Corps, and it's helped me drastically, the discipline aspect of it. I came back and was able to do some classes while I was on active duty in the Marine Corps, and actually in 2.5 years, I graduate here in 2 weeks with
Awesome.
my bachelor's degree, and I was able to do that in 2.5 years, which takes people normally 4 to 5.
Yeah.
So I'll be starting into my master's in May, and it's still paid by the GI Bill. I still have enough time left of that. So it really helped me with what I'm doing now, with just things that the intangibles you get from the Marine Corps.
Right.
You don't get a lot of stuff, that bonuses and money, the Marine Corps is all the intangibles. That's what separates us from everybody else. You know, your self-reliance and self-discipline and self-control and all these things that you get from the Marine Corps that they instilled for you. That's really helped me today.
Okay. Do you think that your faith in God before you went into the military made you a better soldier?
Yes, I do. The biggest thing was when we were on the line in Iraq and the Kuwaiti border, actually in Kuwait, but staring at the line of Iraq, they were starting to shoot Scud missiles our way. And at that point, we were still under the impression that Saddam Hussein had chemical warfare, which he probably did, but at that time he wasn't shooting it. And they were shooting them over us, and we were already in mop gear, which is a jacket and pants that's lined with charcoal to help so the chemicals can't come in. Really hot. But we were that, and every time they'd shoot the Scud missiles, you'd have to put on your gas mask. And even though you're trained for that, that's very scary, as when you've got to put that on, because if you were in a gas or chemical environment, you would have to live that way. You couldn't, you'd have to go, unfortunately it's disgusting, but you'd have to go to the bathroom in your pants. They teach you a way with your gas mask how to drink out of your canteen to get, the water out through a straw, and you can't take your mask off. So when you initially put that on, it's very, very scary.
Not sure if you're going to take it off.
Exactly. And I remember that first time when that happened, being able to have my faith in God and to pray and ask God to help me and deliver me through that situation. And I actually had a friend from New Hampshire. His parents were Catholics, and he kind of was rebelled against his parents, and he still is today. I keep in contact with him. Great guy, but he was kind of an atheist, or he thought that way. And I'll never forget, you always hear that saying, there's no atheist in a foxhole or fighting hole. And we had jumped into this area, and sure enough, he was praying. Everybody was praying. Right. It was quiet. Everybody was scared. So I'd say that definitely helped to have something to rely on. In the Marine Corps, you always hear about the band of brothers. There's so much of a bond that you have with your fellow Marines that served with you, especially in combat, that you build. We still all stay in contact today on the internet, through Facebook, and the greatest thing was being able to turn when, people were going to sleep or you're kind of secluded, to be able to turn to God and faith and just ask for deliverance. Somebody you could speak to kind of get rid of some stuff.
Right. What was your most memorable experience in the military?
Well, I would have to say probably the initial most, biggest impression it left on me. I'm kind of a bigger guy, so when I went to boot camp, I had lost 60-something pounds. So I felt like I had another person running around Parris Island there that I left. But the initial thing was, because you go through so much at recruit training for the Marine Corps, it's really difficult, still is today. Marines are the only ones that have not changed their training from day one. It's the same as it always has been. So it's very difficult. And after 3 months of boot camp, which that's how long recruit training is for Marines, it's the longest one. And there's drill instructors that have been yelling at you for 3 straight months. We have a ceremony called the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor ceremony, which is our sign as a Marine. And you're standing there and they're playing the Lee Greenwood song, God, bless the USA. And it's emotional because you just finished something that we have called the Crucible. And you've walked over 50-something miles and been without food for 2.5 days. You've had minimal food. It's just to put you in that stress-like environment for combat. And that drill instructor places that Eagle, Globe, and Anchor in your hand and calls you a Marine and calls you his brother is very special. And the other thing was to deal with recruit training is at graduation, the day before, we have family day where you go out for several hours with your family around the base. My dad and mom and them walked right past me because I had lost so much weight they didn't recognize me. So they went right past me. So that was a memory. And then I would say the bond that I had with all my friends in the Marine Corps, especially in that initial bit with Charlie Battery, the ones I went to war, and my brothers that I had with me down at, not my physical brothers, but the bond that we had of recruiters. Because recruiting duty is just like combat. It is. It's tough, especially when you're in a war environment like we are now. These parents don't want to send their kids to that. And when a kid has learned so much, if you're going to go to college, that's what you got to do, and then they change their mind, and you have to persuade them to know you're going to go in the Marine Corps. And the Marine Corps is not the Air Force or anybody else. It's harder and to convince him. So I had a really close friend there that we shared so many special memories. He's still in the Marine Corps, and he's in Afghanistan today, and we're able to communicate every so often. He'll email me, and that's the memories I probably have, is that initial of being called a Marine and the friendships that I developed. Just tremendous.
Would you suggest your kids going into the military?
Yeah, I would. The only thing, I would love for them to go into the military, but just the same way as it is with a lot of enlisted people, I would really like my kids to at least get some college education first. I'd love for them to be an officer. I wouldn't, if one was completely swayed to go enlisted, I wouldn't fight him, because it's tough, and it would be tough when it comes to that time to let my kids go, because, you have dreams for your own children where you want them to go and to go to college and be a doctor or a lawyer. But if that's something they wanted to do, I would let them go, just because of what it did for me. I would try to sway them to go to college for a couple years and try to get that done. But then at the same point, I've got to remember myself, and at the initial bit, college wasn't for me because I wasn't disciplined. So if I have a kid in that situation, I might try to sway him to the military. But my only recommendation would be to get a job to where you would have training when you get out, whether it be working on planes or because when I joined, I was 19. I just wanted to blow stuff up, which is cool while you're in the Marine Corps. But when you get out, I'm not really blowing anything up in particular.
No cannoneer jobs in the private sector, huh?
No. You could go to Alaska and blast snow caps is about the only job you can do. But I would just have them try to be an officer, just because the way you build up and you can make a career out of that. Easier, being an officer is definitely tough because you got people that's under you and you've got to take them to war, and everybody looks at you if you make the wrong decision. But just what you get from that and the retirement that's part of that, I would definitely try to get them that way.
Do you have any regrets about the military?
No, I don't. I don't. I really do not know. I was very, I wouldn't say necessarily troubled, but in one aspect I was. I was a natural leader when I was initially as a kid and going up, and then my parents had divorced, and that kind of changed my whole aspect. And then I was looking for acceptance from people, and got me into drugs and alcohol and things of that nature, and the party scene. And I really don't know where I would be today if I hadn't. I had gotten with tickets and stuff, in trouble with the law, and I don't know where I'd be today if I had not have went into the military. So I absolutely have no regrets at all. I met my wife from there. Like I said, all the friendships, I don't regret it at all.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No.
All right. I'd like to thank you for your interview, and appreciate all you've done.
All right. Thank you.